this meeting is being recorded in case anybody didn't know. And we will then have a panel that will consist of 3 of our executive directors / presidents from 3 of our organizations. Dazon Dixon Diallo, who is the president of Sister Love based in Atlanta, and Jeanette Robinson Flint, who is the executive director of Black Women for Wellness based in Los Angeles. And where is, oh, and there she is. And Latasha D. Mays, who is the president of New Voices for Reproductive Justice. And her organization is based in Philadelphia. And so we're going to go ahead and get started and talk specifically about the data that we have. This is a national, the reality is that national surveys of Black adults is very rare. Usually we have surveys where Black people are like 5% or 10% of the survey. This particular survey is 100% of Black adults, women and men over the age of 18 and up. And we actually did a survey in 2017 first. It was the first big national survey that we did of Black adults. And we commissioned PerryUndem, a polling firm, to do the survey. And so this second survey, the first one was done 6 months into the Trump administration. The second one we did right after the 2020 election, presidential election. And we wanted to find out exactly what people were thinking about the election, but also just about general issues. In the first survey that we did, we asked specifically about how people felt toward the political landscape, about racism, about reproductive justice. And our goal really was to provide research to policymakers, to the media, and other parties who wanted to understand the lives of Black adults in America. And so in the follow-up, our goal was very much the same, but we added questions about COVID, the COVID pandemic, and questions about the racial protests that took place after the murder of George Floyd. And we wanted to, again, get a sense of what people thought about a number of different areas. So I'm going to go right into the specifics of the polling. Can we go to the next slide? So one of the things that we did do is we asked a question, a very general question: considering everything, do you think it is a good time or a bad time to be a Black woman in America, to be a Black man in America, to be a white woman in America, or to be a white man? And most of our respondents thought that it was a bad time to be Black in America. And only 18% thought it was a good time for Black women in America. And only 11% of the respondents thought it was a good time for Black men in America. In the contrast, 60% of them thought it was a good time for white women in America, and 65% felt it was a good time for white men in America. Go to the next. So we wanted to look at how people felt about the direction the country is going. And remember, this is after 4 years of the Trump administration and right after the presidential election. So when we asked this question in 2017, which, as I said, was 6 months into the Trump administration, only 15% of the respondents thought that the country was heading in the right direction. 84% felt that it was on the wrong track. When we asked the question in December of 2020, 42% felt the country was heading in the right direction. And remember, it was right after the presidential election. 57% felt that it was still going in the wrong direction. We go to the next. We asked a question about how people felt when Trump was first elected. 63% were worried, Another 45% listed that they were scared. 42% said angry, and 28% said that they were depressed. When we asked the question about how they were feeling after the Biden election, after Biden won the presidential election, optimistic, 49%, 55% said hopeful, 46% said relieved, and 44% said they were happy. So the shift was clearly there. People were feeling much better about Biden being elected and Trump no longer being in office. Next. We also asked them how they felt about Kamala Harris becoming the vice president. And again, 56% were very hopeful, 52% said they were happy, 34% said they were relieved. So basically about a third, 31% of the respondents think that Harris would have a lot of power as a vice president and would get things done. 51% said they thought she was going to really get things done. Next. So I want to talk a little bit about what people's experiences were in the past 4 years. In 2017, 64% of Black adults predicted that President Trump's policies would harm Black people. In December of 2020, 66% said that they believed his policies had negatively affected Black people. So that they were not particularly optimistic right after the 2016 election, but that worry and being concerned played out after 4 years, where they did believe that Trump's policies had negatively affected Black people. Go to the next. And we basically just asked them to give us one word that would describe the past 4 years of the Trump administration. And what they said was disastrous, chaotic, hell, horrible, scary, disappointing, disgraceful. So there was very few people who felt, there was a couple of people who said that it was great, but almost all the other responses were that it was terrible, that it was a disaster, especially for Black people. Okay. We also saw a lot of themes of racism, violence, safety, and security issues emerge throughout the data. Go to the next. And we pulled out some of those responses specifically from Black women. Like 88% agreed that President Trump had made people feel more confident to be racist, that it was okay to be racist. 88% of those people. 80% said that Black people's lives were more in danger under President Trump. 75% said that in the last 4 years, they felt fear and anxiety about their family safety because of police violence. 84% said they felt fear and anxiety about their family's safety because of COVID-19. And if you recall, what we do know about the coronavirus is that it mostly impacted Black and Hispanic families. 44% said that they knew someone who had died because of COVID-19. So those numbers were essentially the same. 55% said that in the past 4 years, they felt fear and anxiety about their family's safety because of racism in their own community. They also said that they felt fear and anxiety because of racism in their place of work. 61% said that racism had a negative effect on their mental and emotional health. Go to the next slide. With younger respondents, people who were between the ages of 18 and 29, they were more likely than others to face threats and higher levels of insecurity. For example, 71% said that they had faced racist comments in the past 4 years, compared to 52% of other respondents. And they also said that they had less than $200 in savings, so that they felt that their economically they were in worse shape. And again, remember, this was right after the COVID pandemic. The country was shut down, people were being laid off. And so younger people felt that had been laid off from work and felt that they were in economic straits. Go to the next one. We wanted to look at voting as well and see exactly how people felt about casting their votes. Next. And what was fascinating is 76% of the respondents felt that the Black community had the power to change the outcome of elections. 73% said that they think President Biden won because of the Black community's votes. And even he acknowledged that it was not just Black community, but specifically Black women's votes. 79% agreed to the statement that Black communities have the power to lead the country to a more free and just society. And that was both, in terms of the respondents, that was both Black women, who said 79%, and Black men, who said 79%, agreed that Black communities have the power to lead the country to a more free and just society. And when we're looking at what's happening right now with some of the laws being passed to suppress Black voters, we understand what that power means to those who are trying to stay in power. Next. 3 in 10 voters said that they had waited for more than 30 minutes in line, and that was a problem. Next. But they also felt that they had to come out and vote. 92% said it was their duty to vote after so many people had fought for the right to vote. 84% said they came out to vote because the stakes were too high in this election to sit out. 72% said that their life depended on it. And a large 80% said that they came out to vote because they felt that their children's lives depended on it. Next. Women were slightly more likely than men to feel that their life depended on voting in the election. 75% of women said, I felt like my life depended on it. 68% of men said that. 81% of women felt that their children's lives depended on it. And 78% of men said the same thing. Next. And so we wanted to pull out a few of the comments that people made for those who said that they felt their life depended on the election. Some of the comments that were made, one person said, I felt like there was a war on Black people with the police departments of America and the KKK was coming back into existence. Someone else said it feels like African Americans have targets on their backs. Someone else said, after Trump, I feel democracy in America could easily crumble. GOP politicians joined Trump in advancing white supremacy, erosion of civil rights, and weaponizing his Department of Justice against Black people. There were some other comments, but I want to go to the next slide. This is what some of the people said who made the statement that they came out to vote because they felt like their children's lives depended on the election. One person said, if Trump stayed in office, the racism would have been worse for my children because he made it okay. Another person said, my 3 young Black sons don't deserve Trump's hatred. My children would not have any opportunity and could very well possibly die in a racist world. Another person said, my children, he had 4, all have college degrees and are not more well off than my husband and I, even my parents. They should be. College loans, company layoffs, downsizing, having to work 2 or more jobs to manage. It's affected them as it has others of their generation. Go to the next. We also asked the question, did George Floyd's murder and the events coming after it make you feel more motivated to vote in the 2020 election? And the data shows that people were more motivated and mobilized quite a bit in their communities to vote. 64% of identified Democratic women said that yes, they felt more motivated. Biden voters, 62% said more motivated. People who did not live in the metro area, which means Black people out in the rural areas, 60% said they were more motivated. Parents of children under the age of 18, another 60% said that they were more motivated. Women, men, younger people, 18 to 29, 54% said they were more motivated by George Floyd's murder and their subsequent events. And so it was clear that that was a galvanizing point, that not only did people take to the streets because they wanted change, but that carried over for the entire summer into the fall and into the election. Go to the next. So we wanted to look also at what kind of policy issues impacted people's decisions to have children. Go to. And we had asked this question before in the earlier survey. So Black adults weigh many factors in deciding whether or not to raise a family or to expand a family. And they ranged anywhere from job opportunities that pay a livable wage to the amount of money in their savings. If you recall, younger people said they had less than $200 in their savings. Being safe from police violence, 61% said that was an important issue. Systemic racism, 59% said that was an issue that factored into their thinking. Housing, having access to affordable health care, having access to higher education and good public schools, equal opportunity in the workplace. Next slide. But people also said things like over-policing in Black community. Black maternal health was a concern. Mass incarceration of Black people was a concern. The state of their neighborhood in terms of cleanup for trash and repair of streets. 44% said the right to vote was a factor in making a determination about whether or not to have children. Having access to clean water. So there were both specific issues and then there were systems changes that impacted people's decisions. Go to the next. Younger Black women also had the same broader range of factors, but in higher percentages. So for instance, younger women said having job opportunities that pay a livable wage, 77% of them said that was important, versus older women who said who were at 56%. The amount of money in your savings, 73% of younger women said that was a factor. Being safe from police violence, 72%. Systemic racism, 71%. So they felt the same way about factors things that they considered when they thought about having a child or expanding their families, but their level of intensity was much higher. Next. Go on to the next one. So we also asked questions about what would need to happen to make it a better time to be a Black woman in America. Remember, when we asked that question earlier about being Black in America, more people said that it was a bad time. So we wanted to know what they thought should happen to make it a good time. Of the Black women, 15% say it's a good time to be a Black woman in America. That's only 15%. So the question about what would be needed, next. So we asked, in your opinion, how important is each of these issues to making it a better time for a Black woman in America who is free to raise healthy children as she chooses? 75% said increasing job opportunities that pay a livable wage. 74% making sure everyone has access to clean water. 70% said having equal pay in the workplace. 70% said dismantling systemic racism. So that was an important change that people wanted. And that's a systems change, not just an issue. Having equal opportunity to move up in the workplace, having quality, affordable health care, having paid medical and family leave, which the United States is one of the few countries that does not have paid medical and family leave. Improving the quality of public schools, improving access to healthy and affordable food options. And that particular point has come up over and over again in our polling. Go to the next. There was also stuff like increasing affordable housing, making sure that their affordable education, higher education was accessible, protecting the right to vote in future elections. Again, a big issue, systems changing again. Improving access to affordable care, making sure that there is support for women who face domestic violence. Improving Black maternal health, a big issue. 64% of the women said this was a big issue for them. Go to the next slide. So we wanted to look at issues around reproductive health care policy. Next. We asked the question, do you agree or disagree? A woman should be able to get birth control through her health insurance even if her boss disagrees with the idea. 91% of the respondents said yes, that they agreed with that health insurance should cover birth control, regardless of what their boss may think about it. Next. We also asked a question about whether they agreed with the statement, whether she has private or government funded coverage. Every woman should have coverage for the full range of pregnancy related care, including prenatal care and abortion care. 85% of the respondents said yes, they agreed with that statement. 13% said they disagreed. So it was clear that people believe that health coverage is critical to getting abortion care as well as maternal pregnancy related care. And if you know anything about some of the policies, people who are on Medicaid cannot use their health insurance to cover abortion services. Next. We also asked them if they thought that abortion services were at risk in the country today. And 59%, almost 60% said that they felt that abortion services were at risk. And if you think about it, right now what we have is a case before the Supreme Court that would allow the court, if it chooses, to outlaw abortion or to erode abortion services. Go to the next. Two-thirds of the respondents also said that for them, abortion was not a religious issue. And 44% of them who identified as being very religious said that they did not think abortion was a religious issue. Next. We asked them specifically about whether or not they would be more likely to support a candidate in their state legislature who supported the right to have access to abortion. And we found out that 42% said that they would support a candidate who supported having access to abortion care services. 13% said they would oppose it. The rest were undecided. Next. We also asked a question about whether or not they would trust Black women to make decisions on these these issues. 91% said a woman's ability to control whether or not she has children is an important part of her financial stability for herself and her family. 89% said that each woman should have the right to make her own decision on abortion, even if I may disagree with her decision. 85% said, when it comes to abortion, I trust Black women to make the personal decisions that's best for themselves. And another 85%, the same 85% said, when it came to abortion, I trust Black women to make the decision that is best for their families. So it was clear that the large majority do trust Black women to make their own decisions about whether or not to carry a pregnancy to term. Next. So now we're going to, that's the end of the data to be that we wanted to cover. And so we're going to go and have a discussion. And I will be the moderator for the discussion. So why don't we introduce the panelists? We had talked about them before. As I said, Dazon Dixon Diallo, who is the founder and president of Sister Love. Next. Jeanette Robinson Flint, who is the executive director of Black Women for Wellness. And Latasha D. Mays, who is the president and CEO of New Voices for Reproductive Justice. So we're going to put them all on the screen again so that we can have this discussion. And I want to just ask a question. I know that we're going to have some Q&A later, but I want to ask an overall discussion question for the panel. Given what you've heard, you're each from different states, and given your work in the state, what's your reflections on what you've heard in this data? And I'll go to Dazon first.
Well, first, thank you, Marcella. This is first a really robust piece of work. The polling data is probably, you know, when we did our first poll about, I don't know, it's at least 10 years ago now. One of the things that I said first is, this is what we say when you ask us. And what I mean by that is when you propose the questions or when you pose the questions in our own understanding and in our voice, and I do mean that with a pun and unintentionally with a pun, in our voice, when we get these questions, you get a little bit more depth and you get a little bit more clarity and honesty about where we are on a lot of these issues. And I think that this poll has done no different and actually has done even better than we've done before. In terms of where these issues may be in alignment or not, or sit in synergy with where we are in the state of Georgia, I think it's pretty much right on point, if not just even a little more understated. And the reason I say that is because we are in the state where women, Black women in particular, fought, as my Nana would say, fought to the eye teeth to change the election outcome, because all of these issues mattered, all of them. And it wasn't a matter of having to prioritize one or the other. It was a matter of being clear about the bundling of all of these critical challenges to Black people, Black families, Black communities, and Black women who are predominantly responsible for all of those things, have as their top concerns. I do believe that maybe if I said we depart tiny bit is that it's actually a little bit worse, right? I think when you think about how the issues are playing out in the Deep South, and the Deep South is a bigger distinction than geography, right? So when you look at how these issues play out in the Deep South, and if we aggregated or disaggregated some of this polling for regions, I have a feeling that those higher numbers that you were seeing in those responses are coming from our region. Life is hard. We can see that it is not just a matter of changing policy to save power. It is literally hateful. It is literally coming up against what is fearing the so-called power structure the most, which is non-white, non-male, non-heterosexual people finding their voice, finding their place, and using their God-given and constitutionally guaranteed right to have a say and to be treated equally in this country. And so I think that if I took this and went straight in and said, so what do you people in Georgia think? You would have some more interesting numbers. The last thing I would say before we move on is that what I'm clear about, which brings me back to how we've come to these differences between 2017 and 2020, is that we lost a big gubernatorial election in 2018.
Mhm.
That started a lot of what changed between, I mean, the election of 2017 was one thing, but the loss in the state of Georgia in 2018 by right up, straight out stealing an election is what has driven a lot more of the change. And so I am constantly letting people know and reminding them that when Black women organize, we change things for the better for everybody. And that's what scares the opposition the most, because that also means we have the power to bring more people together, to organize across a lot of different experiences and a lot of different demographics. And that is exactly what you saw happen in this past election. And it is not lost upon us. We are not asleep on the fact that democracy itself is in danger. It is literally sitting on death row and walking a slow walk towards the chamber because you have this other force that sees what's coming. And so what I love about this conversation in terms of where the country is heading is that you're getting a really good glimpse of what it is we need to be working on and how we need to be working on them, because we are at just emerging into or at the advent of a youth bulge, and that youth bulge will be taking over within the next 20 years. And when Black and brown people and young people and femme-bodied people and femme-minded people are the majority of this country by 2040 or so, these are the very issues that we should have made a lot more headway on by then, if we are to absolutely achieve and hold the space of power that we should have as the majority in this country as a voting bloc. That's what this poll tells me, and that Black families are right on point.
Jan?
Well, first of all, Marcella, thank you for doing the poll, for asking Black folks what we think, because we need the data, we need the research, we need the documentation of our thoughts and opinions. And so few of us are asked what we think. And then have it documented in a poll where we can say, here's the data about what we think. So thank you for taking the time, effort, and resources to make this happen. It is so important that we know what Black folks are thinking, how we are feeling about what is going on in this country. From California, following the election, we had an interesting battle in California, in that one of the things that happened is that there are no Black women in the Senate at this point in time. And the Senate is a very powerful body of folks. And the one Black woman that was in the Senate was Kamala Harris, and from California. So we had that opportunity, or we thought we had that opportunity, to keep a Black woman in the Senate. But, and Black women organized. It was not only the coalition of Black women that put together Georgia said, what y'all need, California? How are we gonna make this happen? And we were like, we need a Black woman in the Senate, and we got some names. We got a short list of that. And I believe it was very much a demonstration of, Black women, y'all asking for too much now. Y'all want a seat at the table? No. So, and we began to really feel that slap back, that pushback, like, Black women, y'all just doing too much right now. So looking at the politics of how, do Black women feel that we make a change in this country, that we make a difference in this country, that we lift everyone when we make a change? Yes, we do. But I also felt the abject fear of those other people. right? And I'm not only talking you white males, but some other folks too were like, what about these Black women? What are they gonna do? So that to me was, some of the thoughts that I've had about how things are going now and the work that we have before us. One of the things, there are two things I want to say. One of the things that I would like more information is the fear factor around maternal health. So Black Women for Wellness is in a unique position right now, is that we have this staff of Black women, and we talk about maternal health on a regular and consistent basis. And what I am noticing among young Black women, because we are talking about maternal health so much, that they have articulated some fear about being pregnant and going through with pregnancies, because we like use this data, 243% of Black women are more likely to die. How do we change the narrative on that? So that's, I think, what I'm like, how do we begin to document that so we can create solutions so Black women are not afraid of their power and are able to step into it and keep it moving. The other thought that I had, just in terms of listening to the data, I think one of the things that this pandemic did was absolutely illustrate the need for national health insurance, right? The health insurance that is not tied to our job or place of employment. The health insurance that is offered to everyone if you're sick, or as to everyone to keep you well in terms of prevention. I don't think we've driven that point home as much as we need to about how we need to decouple your health and your access to health from your job, right? And so many people lost their work during this particular point in time and then needed health care. So that's the point that I want to say, how do we get more data on that issue so we can drive that point home now while we still have this illumination on the state of health in this country?
Thank you, Jan. Natasha?
I'm just sitting here and to myself, listening to all of the great data and to my fearless warriors in the reproductive justice movement. Just such brilliance as always that comes out of An Armed Voice, and New Voices is always proud to be a partner in this initiative. This data is so needed. When we started doing research in Our Own Voice, it was what we needed, but didn't know that we needed, because we're so into the work. But data and research is essential to measuring conditions, measuring impact, and in order to guide the work that we do. So I'm happy to be here, happy to review this great research. I'm always going to say I need research for Pennsylvania and Ohio specifically. And I know Dazan and Jan would say the same, because when we present this data to our constituents and stakeholders, as well as to policymakers and people making decisions about our lives, it is so helpful, because that's one of the first ways that elected officials and policymakers try to blow you off. But you can't deny the numbers. And that has been important to our work, especially our policy work over these last few years. What stuck out initially for me, there were so many things, was that $200 in savings. $200, less than $200 in savings. So that could mean zero. That could mean negative. And there's already been research about Black women's net worth being $5 and $0. So how much, as Jan said, COVID-19 has only exacerbated the economic situation for Black families. That really stuck out for me, particularly because New Voices, as so many of our organizations have had to do, we have to pivot our work in a major monumental way over this past year. And so one of the things I thought we'd never do was actually direct service. But we saw the need and we saw what was missing, and we launched our COVID-19 initiative with seed money from In Our Own Voice. And what we were able to do, besides like diapers and menstrual products, we were able to add so many more services, but we did cash grants too, no questions asked. And those grants were for $250. And I was telling my team, I was like, that's not enough money. And it's not. But for people who have less than $200 in their savings, we knew that that made some even small difference that day or that week. But that really stuck out to me. And the truth of the matter is that Black women, femmes, girls, and gender expansive folks are living hard lives in Pennsylvania and in Ohio. I'm based in Philadelphia, lived for a long time in Pittsburgh. And you know, we do our work in Cleveland as well. So they're so different. Each city is so incredibly different. But coming to Philadelphia, you know, there's a larger scale of the reproductive justice issues that we're organizing around. There's the greater opportunity for impact. And Philadelphia is the largest poorest city in the nation. And so that really puts us in a unique situation to build and expand and grow our movement for reproductive justice. I think I would be remiss if I did not say that Black women voters did the damn thing on election day, or election week, as it were. And we did what needed to be done. You know, I don't know if we saved the democracy, but we certainly helped thwart it from sudden doom. And it was because of work like ours and New Voices, engaging voters who were not likely to vote, who were unlikely to vote. You know, not just engaging super voters. We were reaching people that are deemed unreachable. And so that's 8 years of work leading up to it. It wasn't just that one election. It was years of Black women organizing on the ground, unsung, just doing the work, but doing it all the time, not parachuting in, because we believe that you have to integrate the electoral justice with the reproductive justice. You can't do them separately and apart. I really was interested in the abortion as not being a religious issue. In Pittsburgh is a very religious community, very Catholic community. And again, I would be interested to see how that would look either in the state or regionally. I loved that the support for candidates who support abortion access, you know, have a greater likelihood of people voting for them because of that. And I think that is a great message to take to legislators or people we know who want to run, because that's some of their fear. Like, or when they're in office talking about abortion access and talking about other reproductive justice issues, we have to support them not only with our organizing and advocacy, but with this data and research to assure them that we have their back.
Thanks. So there's another question that came up that's coming from the group. It says, the last slide about trusting Black women regarding abortion, was this asked of all Black people or just Black women? It was asked of both women and men. And that percentage point was for both. So just so you know, there's another question I want to ask the panel before we go to the Q&A from individuals who are listening in. I want to talk a little bit about voting rights, because when we ask the question about how people, what entered into their mind when they talked about having children, voting rights was one of those issues that popped up there. When we asked a question about what would make it better for Black women living in society to be able to raise children and stuff, and healthy children, free of fear and everything, voting rights was one of those issues. And we know that voting rights is what changed the election in 2020. As well as specifically in Georgia in terms of a runoff election. And we're now faced with all of these states writing these oppressive laws that are really designed to simply stop Black women, Latinas, API women, Native and Indigenous women from voting, because they know when all of us come out and vote, things change, and they change for the better. So I want to have a little discussion about what people think about the laws that are being passed and how we fight against that. And again, I'm going to start with Dazon, because Georgia is like the epicenter right now of oppressive
Zero.
voting rights laws.
Yeah, ground negative zero, as a matter of fact. Yes. Well, I don't think, for those who know their history in this country, that it's lost on anybody to recognize what this looks like and smells like, right? Just as we were hopeful towards what looked like the second or third, maybe the third reconstruction towards the aspirations of what, the Constitution should be guaranteeing us as a democratic society. The first backlash against Reconstruction, called, I think it was redemption or something, was about 10 years before they could put in new laws and do a whole lot of damage to take away the rights for people to vote, to take away people's freedoms through certain amendments and all kinds of changes. We are right there, but it's not going to take them 10 years this time. They're already enacting them. It's like within a year. I'm also reminded, like here in the state of Georgia, we're one of them, where they are still doing the fake forensics on an election that's now 7 months gone, right? And still expecting to be able to tell a story that the former president is actually going to be reseated, right, and that they're actually going through processes that they think are going to undo the will of nearly 80 million voters. For real though? And on top of that, right, you not only have trying to make sure that this election is disqualified and undone, but that all the future elections are not only rigged in a way that our vote may or may not matter, but even if we are strong enough to organize enough people in our state to make that vote, that they can have just a handful of people who say, well, we don't like how y'all voted, and will overturn it.
Change it.
That is a direct and immediate threat to everything we believe as in terms of our own freedoms and in terms of our democracy. And not only that, what is most distressing, I think, about so much of this is that we are still doing it in the midst of a pandemic, and that we're doing it at a time where daily survival is as critical as our national survival. And people are just tired, and people are beaten down and traumatized, and consistently being traumatized, and things aren't changing as fast as some folks want them to. And so if there's anything out of this, and I thought I was going to hear it come from Latasha, but one of the things that I think we're going to see is that not only is there the need for us to organize around these laws and around the counters, and making sure that we have enough not just legislators, but legal minds, because everything's going to end up in the courts for a long time. And hopefully there'll be more judges who are correct thinking and progressive thinking than what was appointed in the last administration. But that we're also going to need a lot more of us, Black women, running and winning offices, being in those seats. So not just fighting for people to vote for who we want, but being the people we want in those seats. I think that that's the clarion call that is in front of us right now. At the same time as these laws are being promulgated, we also have to be able to counter those with the laws that make the most sense, but also with the people who are going to be representing us with the laws that we really want and the policies that we're going to have to live under. I'm in public health, and we look in public health at issues of, in terms of, and I've even added a new category, there's social determinants of health, which we tend to look at in terms of access to care and housing and education and all of those social implements within the system, and even structural implements, right? And the life determinants, as far as I'm concerned, are those things that you can't change. You can change the social determinants. You can't change my race. You can't change my gender identity. You can't change my sexual identity. You can't change my age. I can try hard, but you can't change my age. There's also political determinants of health that we have not yet accounted for. And that's what this poll tells us also, in terms of how these policies, these laws are killing us, literally, figuratively, and finitely. It's crystal clear. You can pinpoint it, you can trace, you can follow the track of, you make a decision about whether or not a particular way or group of people can vote or not vote, directly impacts whether they actually will end up getting a health system that makes sense to them. So it literally is about eliminating us, the same way Jim Crow was, the same way redemption was, and the same way the current, that Trump is not in office. Trump ain't even on Twitter. Trump doesn't really have the voice that he had unless he goes out to all of these rallies with his base. Trumpism is alive. And what Trumpism is the anti-democratic force. That's what we're up against. And anybody who thinks it's anything less or compartmentalized or siloed than that are fooling themselves and might as well get used to picking cotton. And I mean that. I live in Georgia.
So Tasha, I want to ask you a question about For the People and the John Lewis Voter Advancement Act. What do you think should be the strategy for getting either of those bills passed in the Senate?
With no Black women.
Right. I mean,
with no Black women.
Yeah, I mean, for us, I don't know. I mean, we should always be advocating at all levels to win policy that is far reaching, that is effective. But I mean, honestly, it comes down to the states. For us in our work, for me and mine in Pennsylvania and Ohio has joined the chorus of many state legislatures who have introduced voter suppression bills in Ohio's HB 294. And so, you know, it's the squabbling over the things that allow those most marginalized, those first and most impacted by the issues we organize around, so that they don't have access to voting, no matter what their background is, what their identity and gender is, what their lived experiences are. So we're talking about literally how many drop boxes are going to be in each county and where they're going to be and how many they're going to be. Then there's issues around, of course, registration. Their biggest thing is also limiting absentee ballots, that whole process itself, but also absentee in-person voting, which is what a lot of states had, including Ohio and Pennsylvania, where you could go and vote ahead of time. They didn't really promote it, but it was something, it basically was early voting on some level. I will say Ohio had early voting before, but now they're limiting the days and deadlines for absentee ballots. They're limiting hours for early voting. So there's a variety of ways. They're very insidious ways and very overt ways of actually limiting a person's ability to vote, including limiting the Secretary of State's ability to prepay for postage. So, I mean, for us during 2020, we did a lot of things that we don't have time to discuss to get folks out to vote. But one of those things were taking stamps to people, or literally driving people to drop off their ballot, not go to the polling location and vote, but just to drop off their ballot. So for us, I don't have an opinion about S1. I think our focus, and I think where we can be most effective, is in the states.
Okay. That was a question actually that someone asked about, specifically about what to do with the bill in the US Senate, since we have a 50-50 split. And in order to get something even called, you need 60 votes because of the filibuster. So Jan, I'd like to ask you a question about the filibuster. Is the filibuster keeping good law from being passed? Is it really a relic of Jim Crow?
Okay. I think that it is a tool of white nationalism. And they will use every tool in their toolbox to stay in power and terrorize us with. So that's what I think about the filibuster. And if it ever swung to the other side where people of color could use this as a tool, and I believe, I feel like it was John Lewis who attempted to use it in Congress a few years back. And then it became an issue and a challenge, right? So yeah, it is a Jim Crow tool that white nationalists will use as they see fit to stay in power. I also saw a couple of questions in the Q&A. One was about water. Mm-hmm. And why is water important to Black women? Because water is important. One of the issues one of the places we can look at is Flint, Michigan, in terms of what happened with Flint when the government decided it was okay to use lead piping and to override even the elected folks that Flint, Michigan people had put in place. So, and water is extremely important for our health and well-being in terms of our physical health and well-being. And it is also an access to water issue going on. You can't even grow your garden if you don't have good water. So we are looking at access to water across the country. And when I say water, I mean good, clean, quality water that is being challenged. And Black women are not monolithic in terms of, we look at big pictures. We see the whole picture of what is going on with our environment, as well as what is going on with our politics. And then the last thing I wanted to say also about politics, there are two things that are going on also. The right to vote, and I'm going to give kudos to In Our Own Voice and to Latasha and to Dazon and to Black Women for Wellness, because we've been out here organizing folks to vote, not with this election in 2016, but going back to early 2000s when issues around access to abortion, access to reproductive health care were on the ballot. It was on the ballot 3 times in California before we even got to an Obama era, right? So we've been doing that, organizing around voters, because those issues have been on the ballot for a long time. So people have developed trust of our organization and trust that we will give them a critical analysis that centers Black women in the issue that is on the ballot, as well as looking at who folks are voting for or what those voting records are, right? Because the other part of when you have the right to vote, or when you should be exercising your right to vote, you need something to vote for. You need someone to vote for. And a lot of times what I'm looking at now is you got a choice between hell nah and no, right? So that's the part where we're looking at now in terms of we need folks to really step up to the plate, Black women with good politics that center us, as well as to keep working with and funding those Black organizations who are on the front line, on the battleground, have built a relationship and a reputation in the community that is looking out for our community.
Okay. I'm going to go to, there's a question that's from Paula Bryant, who is Micaiah Bryant's mom, and she asked a question specifically about family preservation services and about putting families back together, which is one of the things that Biden did talk about during his campaign. And so she would like to ask a question about how, if anyone here works on that issue, that area. And so I'm putting that out there on family preservation, about putting families back together again. Her daughter was in foster care.
You know, that such a tragedy. That was such a tragedy. And I'm thinking about it because this happened, was it like 5 minutes after what was his name? Chauvin was convicted. And during that week, there was a brother killed also. Police terrorism is run amok, right? And I think that is a result of, I actually think it's a result of Obama being elected and the fear that came about because of that, which is why then the next person was elected. But that for me is part of defund the police. That is a part of what we need to look at, because they didn't even think about killing this Black child. They just came in, killed her. Yeah. Right.
Well, if I thank you, Paula, for the question. And I don't know if a day goes by that at some point a Black woman, and hopefully any mother, but that a Black woman in this country isn't thinking about the pain of all the Black mothers who are suffering for decades. Because we're not just talking about what's happened in 21 or 20. Their children are gone, and they're gone forever. And we love you, and we send you our light and our love. And it spoke to me immediately when the whole story about the fact that Ma'Khia was in foster care at that time is that the same way what this poll, and I think this is how I want to close on it, is that we have talked and we have looked at all of these siloed issues. We talked about the vote, we talked about electoral politics, we talked about reproductive justice, and the fact that the right to protect, to raise, to secure, to advance the family that you choose to have is a part of reproductive justice, lifts up this whole sector of family focus. And I'm saying that very intentionally, because if you remember for decades, that whole right-wing element against abortion, against contraception, against LGBTQ lives was about focus on the family. Mm-hmm. What this poll is giving us an opportunity to do is flip that script too, and to focus on family, whether it's about family and medical leave, whether it's about family protections, whether it's about upending the current so-called foster or child protection system. When we begin to think about families, Black families, and by extension, other families, in a structural way, in a policy-oriented way, in a service delivery way, and also in a social and cultural context, then we change what can happen when there are distresses and when there are stressful moments that happen for girls like Ma'Khia and for so many other children whose families go through things. All families go through things, but we don't have the structure built to respect the Black family that goes through things. And that's what's needed just as much as any of those other in the other transformations and reforms that we're talking about.
I'm going to go to Latasha as the last answer, and then we're going to have to close out because we are over time.
Thank you, Marcella. It's important for me to address Ms. Paula, especially since our work is, based in Ohio. I definitely, if we can connect with you, if you can send us your contact information, we will reach back out with you. This is really hitting home. We will send our condolences from all of our organizations and in our own voice. We are so sorry for which did not have to be a loss because your child was calling for help. And so it's hitting home because Black mothers that we work with are having their children removed and separated from them when they reach out for support, the default for Black families and Black mothers is criminalization. And so in any way that New Voices can be of support to you, we want to be that. And it is not an issue that we focus enough on in our movement for reproductive justice. We do talk about the right to parent your children, but what does that mean in its fullness? We certainly have different ideas of what the Black family is, which I love about the reproductive justice movement. But I'm saying this from me and New Voices and Black RJ, we stand with you. We want justice for Ma'Khia. And again, we are holding you in the highest energy and offer you peace and comfort during this time. So please send your information to us so we can follow up with you.
Okay. And with that, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank our panelists, Dazon, Jan, Latasha, for always being there and being our sisters in the struggle. We want to thank you. And we want to thank everyone who has participated in this polling webinar. As Latasha said, reproductive justice is at its core about the right to have a child, the right not to have a child, and the right to raise the children you have in a healthy, safe environment. And that is at the core. And there are many things that go into that. And we all work on those areas, those intersectional areas, to help us to really thrive, for families to thrive. And that's really what we're about. So again, thank you very much for being on. Thank all the staff who does all the technical pieces of webinars that I don't know anything about. And again, good afternoon, and thank you for participating.